They say a duchess doesn't run. She endures. She smiles through frost-bitten dinners and loveless beds. She pretends not to see when her husband's eyes warm for someone else. But on a winter night in 1847, Elena Harrow proved them all wrong. She didn't scream, didn't beg, didn't throw herself at Victor's feet and plead for scraps of affection. She simply vanished. And when the Duke of Ironvale finally realized what he'd lost, it was already too late. This is the story of a woman who chose herself over everything, and the man who had to learn what that silence cost him. Stay until the end to see how this ends. Like this video and comment what city you're watching from. The morning Elena discovered the truth, the sky over Ironvale was the color of old steel. She stood at the eastern window of her chambers, watching servants scurry across the courtyard below like ants preparing for winter. Her breath fogged the glass in small, rhythmic clouds. 2 years she'd lived in this estate, 2 years as the Duchess of Ironvale, and she still felt like a guest who'd overstayed her welcome. The room behind her was beautiful in the way museums are beautiful. Expensive. Untouchable. Cold. The four-poster bed with its heavy brocade curtains had been slept in alone for the past 4 months. The vanity held perfume she never wore because there was no one to wear them for. The wardrobe was full of silk gowns appropriate for a duchess, each one a costume for a role she was growing tired of playing. "Your Grace, shall I bring breakfast to the sitting room?" Elena turned. Her lady's maid, Margaret, stood in the doorway with that cautious expression servants wore around her. Not quite pity, not quite respect. Something uncomfortably in between, like they weren't sure whether to feel sorry for her or judged by her presence. "No, thank you. I'll take it in the conservatory." Margaret's eyebrows lifted slightly. "The conservatory, ma'am? It's rather cold this morning. Perhaps the morning room would be more—" "I'm aware of the temperature, Margaret. The conservatory, please." The maid curtsied and retreated, her footsteps quick against the floorboards. Elena heard her whispering to another servant in the hall. Anna, probably, or maybe Charlotte. They always whispered. About how the Duke barely spoke to his wife. About how her Grace wandered the estate like a ghost in expensive silk. About how there were no children yet. And wasn't that peculiar for a marriage meant to secure the Darnell line? Wasn't it strange how separate their bedchambers were? How formal their dinners? Elena pressed her palm against her stomach, feeling the slight swell there beneath her morning dress. The fabric was loose enough that no one had noticed yet. But they would. Soon. If they only knew. The conservatory was indeed freezing. Frost had crept up the inside of the glass walls overnight, creating delicate patterns that looked like skeletal hands reaching toward the ceiling. The plants were mostly dead. Victor never cared about maintaining things that served no practical purpose, and Elena had learned not to ask for resources to revive them. The rose bushes were brown stalks. The climbing ivy had shriveled to brittle threads. Only a few stubborn herbs near the back wall clung to life. Elena settled into the iron chair near the dead rose bushes and wrapped her shawl tighter around her shoulders. The metal was so cold it burned through the fabric of her dress, but she didn't move. There was something honest about the conservatory. It didn't pretend to be warm, didn't offer false comfort. She'd discovered she was pregnant 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks of holding that secret like a burning coal in her chest, unsure what to do with it. Unsure if it was a blessing or another chain tying her to this place. Tell Victor? The man who hadn't touched her in 4 months? Who took his meals in his study and spoke to her only when household matters required it? Who looked at her across the dinner table with all the warmth of someone examining a piece of furniture he was considering replacing? The thought made her stomach turn, though whether from the pregnancy or the situation, she couldn't tell anymore. The tea Margaret brought was lukewarm by the time Elena touched it. She didn't care. Her mind was elsewhere, circling the same impossible question she'd been avoiding for weeks. What kind of life was she building for this child? A childhood in Ironvale meant growing up in silence. It meant watching your parents maintain separate lives under the same roof. It meant learning that marriage was a transaction, love was weakness, and duty trumped happiness every single time. Elena's own childhood hadn't been much better, but at least her parents had maintained the illusion of affection. Victor didn't even bother with that. "Your Grace." Elena jumped, tea sloshing over the rim of her cup. The housekeeper, Mrs. Blackwood, stood at the conservatory entrance, her face pinched with something that might have been concern or might have been disapproval. With Mrs. Blackwood, it was often hard to tell. The woman had run Ironvale for 20 years and had strong opinions about how a duchess should behave. Opinions Elena consistently failed to meet. The Duke has requested your presence in the blue drawing room at 11 o'clock. Elena glanced at the clock on the mantel. That gave her 40 minutes to prepare for whatever formal, distant conversation Victor deemed necessary. Probably something about the upcoming winter ball or the tenant farmer's grievances, or some other matter that required her ceremonial approval, but not her actual input. Did he say why? No, ma'am. Of course not. Victor never explained himself. He simply expected compliance, assumed it as his birthright the way he assumed the servants would bow and the tenants would pay rent, and his wife would smile politely and never, ever ask for more than he was willing to give. Elena stood, her legs stiff from the cold. The pregnancy made her tired in new ways, not just physically, but emotionally. Everything felt heavier, harder. Tell him I'll be there. Mrs. Blackwood hesitated, her thin lips pressing together. Ma'am, if I may, you might want to dress more warmly. His Grace has company. Something in the housekeeper's tone made Elena pause. It wasn't quite sympathy, but it was close. A warning, maybe. Or an apology in advance. What kind of company? Lady Vivian Ashford arrived an hour ago. She's taking tea with the Duke in his study. The name hit Elena like a fist to the sternum. Lady Vivian. The elegant widow who'd been a fixture at Ironvale social events for the past 6 months. The woman with perfect posture and a laugh like crystal bells. The woman who knew how to tilt her head just so when Victor spoke, making him feel like the most fascinating man in the world. The woman Victor's eyes followed across crowded ballrooms when he thought no one was watching. Elena had told herself she was imagining it, that grief and loneliness were making her paranoid, that a Duke would never be so careless, so obvious, that whatever warmth Victor had for Vivian was just politeness, just the easy charm he showed everyone except his own wife. But Mrs. Blackwood's expression told her everything. The housekeeper knew, the servants knew, probably half the county knew. Elena was the only one who'd been pretending not to see it. I see, Elena said, her voice surprisingly steady. Thank you, Mrs. Blackwood. She didn't go to her chambers to change. Instead, she walked the long way to the blue drawing room, taking the servants' corridor that ran behind the main halls. The narrow passage was dim and cold, lit by small windows that never quite let in enough light. She told herself she was just avoiding the drafts of the grand hallway. She told herself she wasn't hoping to overhear something that would prove her suspicions wrong. But she knew she was lying. The servants' corridor ran directly behind the Duke's study. There was a service door there, kept locked but thin enough that sound traveled through it. Elena had discovered this by accident months ago when she'd heard Victor laughing, actually laughing, while talking to someone she couldn't see. It had startled her so much she'd stood frozen in the corridor for 10 minutes, just listening to her husband sound happy. Now she approached that door again, her heart hammering against her ribs. The voices reached her when she was still 20 feet away. Can't keep doing this. Victor's voice, low and urgent. Elena had never heard that tone from him before. Not with her. Not even in the early days of their marriage when he'd still made some effort to be kind. Why not? A woman's voice. Vivian, smooth and confident. She doesn't care, Victor. Everyone can see it. She walks around this estate like a ghost. She doesn't even try. That's not fair, isn't it? When was the last time she asked you anything personal? When was the last time she showed any interest in your life beyond what's required of her? When was the last time she smiled at you like she actually wanted to be in the same room? Elena's hand found the wall. The cold stone steadied her, kept her upright when her knees wanted to buckle. It's complicated, Victor said, and there was something tired in his voice, something defeated. It's simple. Vivian's voice softened, became almost gentle. You married for duty. I understand that. We all understand that. But you don't have to be miserable forever, Victor. You deserve more than a wife who looks at you like you're a stranger. You deserve someone who sees you, who wants you. What I deserve isn't the point. Then what is? Silence. Long enough that Elena thought the conversation might be over. Long enough that she almost convinced herself to walk away, to preserve whatever dignity she had left. Then Victor spoke again, and his voice was different. Warmer, almost tender. The voice of a man speaking to someone he actually cared about. You're the point. You're the only thing that makes sense anymore. The only thing that feels real. Elena didn't wait to hear more. She turned and walked back the way she'd come, her footsteps silent on the stone floor. Her heart was pounding so hard she thought it might crack through her ribs. Her breath came in short, sharp gasps that had nothing to do with the cold. She'd known. Some part of her had known for months, but knowing and hearing were different things. Suspecting and confirming were worlds apart. In her chambers, she sat at her vanity and stared at her reflection. The same face she'd had at 20 when she'd married Victor. The same dark hair, though maybe a few strands of gray were starting to show at the temples. The same gray eyes. But something in her expression had changed over the past 2 years. She looked tired, worn down, like a piece of fabric that had been washed too many times and was starting to fray at the edges. Defeated. No. The word came sharp and clear, cutting through the fog in her mind. Not defeated. She stood abruptly, startling Margaret, who'd been quietly arranging ribbons in the wardrobe. "Ma'am, are you—" "Help me dress," Elena said. Her voice was steady now, clear. "The burgundy silk with the high collar, and the garnets." Margaret's eyes widened. That dress was for state dinners, not morning calls. It was armor, not clothing. "Are you sure, ma'am? Perhaps something more?" "Yes, I'm sure." If she was going to meet her husband's mistress, she'd do it on her terms. She'd walk into that room looking like exactly what she was. A duchess. Not a ghost. Not a placeholder. Not someone who could be dismissed or pitied or ignored. 20 minutes later, Elena entered the blue drawing room, looking every inch the woman she'd been trained to be. The burgundy silk rustled with each step. The garnets at her throat caught the weak winter light streaming through the windows. Her hair was pinned in an elaborate style that had taken Margaret 15 minutes to achieve. Her spine was straight. Her chin was up. She looked like someone who belonged in this house. Someone who had every right to be here, even if she didn't feel like it. Victor stood near the fireplace, one hand braced against the mantel as he stared into the flames. He turned when she entered, and for just a moment, something flickered in his expression. Surprise, maybe. Or guilt. Or possibly just annoyance that she'd chosen now, of all times, to make an entrance. He was handsome in that cold, aristocratic way that had initially attracted her parents to the match. Tall, broad-shouldered, dark hair with just a touch of silver at the temples. A face that could have been carved from marble, but there was no warmth in it, no softness. He looked at her the way he looked at everything, with cool assessment and mild disinterest. Vivienne sat in the wing chair by the window, perfectly composed in a dress of pale blue that probably cost more than most families earned in a year. Everything about her was perfect. Her posture, her hair, the way she held her teacup like it was a natural extension of her hand. She smiled when she saw Elena, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Your Grace," Vivienne said, rising gracefully. Even her curtsy was perfect. "How lovely to see you. I was just telling the Duke what a beautiful home you keep." "Liar. You were telling him how I don't appreciate him, how I don't deserve him." "Lady Ashford." Elena's voice was cool, polite, exactly the right temperature for addressing a social acquaintance. "This is unexpected. I wasn't aware we were expecting visitors today." "Oh, I do apologize for the intrusion." Vivienne's smile widened, became more genuine. She was enjoying this. "I was just passing through the area and thought I'd stop to discuss the winter charity auction with the Duke. We're hoping Iron Veil will make a contribution this year. The Widows and Orphans Fund, you understand." "Liar. You weren't discussing charity. You were discussing me. Discussing how to carry on your affair without causing a scandal." "Of course," Elena said smoothly. "My husband is very generous with other people's needs." The barb landed. Victor's jaw tightened. Vivienne's smile flickered. "Elena, Victor started. "I wanted to discuss the household accounts with you," Elena interrupted, looking at her husband. "But I can see you're occupied, perhaps this evening, unless you have other plans." The room went very quiet. Outside, a crow cawed. The fire crackled. "This evening I have—" Victor stopped himself, probably realizing that explaining where he'd be would only make things worse. Yes, this evening would be fine. Vivienne was watching them both with barely concealed satisfaction, like someone observing an interesting play. Her fingers drummed lightly against her teacup. She was probably already composing the story she'd tell her friends. How the Duchess of Ironvale had walked in on them. How awkward it had been. How obvious Elena's jealousy was. Elena turned to leave, then paused at the door. She looked back at Victor, really looked at him. Tried to find some trace of the man she'd thought she was marrying, the man who'd been kind to her, once during their brief courtship, who'd said he hoped they could be friends, at least, even if their marriage was arranged. That man was gone, if he'd ever really existed at all. "Oh, and Victor," Elena said quietly, "congratulations on finding someone who actually makes you smile. It's been so long, I'd almost forgotten what that looked like." She was out the door before either of them could respond. In the hallway, Elena's hands were shaking. She pressed them against her stomach, feeling the slight curve there that no one else had noticed yet. The baby moved. Just a flutter, barely perceptible, but real. A reminder that she wasn't just herself anymore. That every decision she made now affected someone else. Someone who deserved better than this. She'd spent 2 years making excuses for Victor's coldness, telling herself that aristocratic marriages were like this, formal, distant, built on duty rather than affection. That she could be content with stability, with security, with a life of careful politeness and separate bedrooms. That love was a luxury, not a necessity. But she'd been lying to herself. And now she was carrying a child who would grow up in this frostbitten house, watching their father save his warmth for someone else. Who would learn that love was something you gave to strangers while keeping your family at arm's length? Who would absorb the lesson that marriage was endurance, not partnership, that you smiled in public and suffered in private? No. The word came to Elena with startling clarity. Simple. Absolute. No. She wouldn't do it. Wouldn't raise a child in this mausoleum of a marriage. Wouldn't teach them that this was normal, acceptable, enough. She walked to her chambers in a daze, her mind spinning with possibilities. She could confront Victor directly, demand he end things with Vivienne. But what would that accomplish? He'd probably just be more discreet. The warmth he showed Vivienne would still exist, just hidden better. And Elena would spend the rest of her life competing for scraps of affection from a man who'd already decided she wasn't worth the effort. She could leave. But where would she go? Back to her parents, who'd sold her off like livestock to secure a business arrangement? They'd send her right back to Ironvale with a lecture about duty and not embarrassing the family name. She could stay and suffer silently, like countless noble women before her. Smile at dinner parties, manage the household, raise the child to be a proper heir, die slowly inside while maintaining appearances. Or, Elena stopped walking. Or she could choose something else entirely. Something no one would expect. Something they'd call scandalous and reckless and completely inappropriate for a woman of her station. She could choose herself. The idea took root in her mind like a seed in fertile soil, dangerous, impossible, absolutely terrifying, and somehow, in that moment, the only thing that made sense. That afternoon, Elena walked through Ironvale with new eyes. She noticed things she'd stopped seeing, the way the servants looked through her rather than at her. The portraits of Darnell ancestors lining the halls, all of them with the same cold eyes as Victor. The rooms that were kept locked because they served no purpose. The overall sense that this was a house, not a home. A museum, not a life. She found herself in the library, surrounded by books no one read. Victor's father had collected them for show, not knowledge. Leather-bound volumes about agriculture and philosophy and classical literature, all gathering dust on mahogany shelves. Elena pulled down a book at random. Travel essays. She flipped through it, reading about places she'd never seen. Cities where women walked freely, countryside where life was simpler, small villages where people knew each other's names and cared about each other's troubles. "Your Grace." Elena looked up. Mrs. Blackwood stood in the doorway, her expression unreadable. "Yes?" "I thought you should know. Lady Ashford has departed. She sent her regards." "How thoughtful." Mrs. Blackwood hesitated. "Ma'am, I don't mean to overstep, but—" "Then don't." The housekeeper's mouth pressed into a thin line. "You deserve better than this." Elena stared at her. In 2 years, Mrs. Blackwood had never said anything remotely personal, had never acknowledged the state of the marriage, or offered any opinion beyond household matters. "Why are you telling me this?" Elena asked. Elena swung. "Because I watched the Duke's mother live this same life. Different woman, same situation. She died at 43, ma'am. Just gave up one day. Took to her bed and never got up again. The doctors said it was her heart, but we all knew better. Some people die from lack of air. She died from lack of everything else. Elena felt something cold settle in her chest. I see. I liked you when you first came here, Mrs. Blackwood continued. You had life in you, spirit. I watched it drain away month by month, and I said nothing because it wasn't my place. But I won't watch another duchess fade away in this house, not without at least saying something. And what would you have me do? Mrs. Blackwood met her eyes. That's not for me to say, ma'am. But whatever it is, do it soon, before you forget there's a choice. She left before Elena could respond. Elena sat in the library for a long time after that, the travel book still open in her lap. The afternoon light faded. The fire burned low. She thought about Victor's mother, who she'd never met, who had died before Elena entered the family, who apparently had lived the same half-life Elena was living now. She thought about her own mother, who taught her that a woman's value came from her marriage, who'd been so proud when Elena caught a duke, who'd never asked if Elena actually wanted this life. She thought about the child growing inside her, the baby who didn't have a choice about being born into this family, into this situation, who deserved a mother who was whole, not broken, present, not fading. That night, Elena attended dinner in the formal dining room. Victor sat at the head of the table 20 feet away. They ate in silence, as they had for months. The only sounds were silverware against china and the crackling fire in the hearth. 7 courses of food neither of them wanted, served by servants who moved like ghosts. The charity auction, Victor said eventually, his voice formal, distant. I've agreed to donate a portion of the timber harvest. I trust that meets with your approval, as if he needed her approval, as if her opinion mattered at all. How generous, Elena said. He frowned at her tone. Is something wrong? Elena set down her fork carefully, the silver clicking against bone china. Her hands were steady. Her voice was calm. Inside, something was breaking, but her exterior remained perfectly composed. Do you love her? Victor went very still. His wine glass paused halfway to his mouth. What? Lady Ashford, do you love her? The silence stretched. Outside, wind rattled the windows. The fire popped, sending up sparks. A servant shifted weight in the corner, the only sign that someone else was witnessing this. That's not... Victor started, then stopped. Set down his glass. This isn't an appropriate dinner conversation. Do you love her? Elena repeated, her voice still calm, still steady. His jaw tightened. A muscle jumped in his cheek. What I feel is irrelevant. I have responsibilities. To this estate, to the title, to me? He looked away. Elena stood. Her chair scraped against the floor, the sound harsh in the quiet room. I need to know, Victor, because I'm trying to understand if there was ever anything real between us, or if I've been a placeholder for 2 years. A womb with a title. A decorative piece of furniture that occasionally signs household ledgers. You're my wife, Victor said, but his voice lacked conviction. That's not an answer. Victor's hands clenched on the table. His knuckles went white. What do you want me to say? That I wish things were different? That I never meant for this to happen? Would that make you feel better, Elena? Would an apology fix this? I want the truth. The truth! Victor stood abruptly, his chair falling backward. The truth is that duty doesn't care about what we want. The truth is that I married you because my father arranged it on his deathbed, because the Harrow lands border ours, because it was strategic and beneficial and completely bloodless. And yes, I wish... He stopped himself, breathing hard. You wish what? Elena's voice was very quiet now, dangerous. I wish I'd had a choice. The words hung in the air like smoke, like poison. Elena felt something inside her go very calm and very cold. Crystalline, clear. She'd known this, of course, had known the marriage was arranged, but there was a difference between knowing you were a business arrangement and hearing your husband say he wished he'd never married you. That given the choice, he would have chosen differently. So do I, Elena said. She left the dining room. Her footsteps echoed on the marble floors. Victor didn't follow. He never did. In her chambers, Elena stood at the window and watched snow begin to fall, thick, heavy flakes that would cover the grounds by morning, turn everything white and clean and new. Margaret appeared with her nightgown, moving quietly. Shall I help you undress, ma'am? No. Elena turned from the window. Pack a trunk instead. Margaret froze, the nightgown hanging from her hands. I beg your pardon? One trunk. Simple dresses, sturdy boots, warm cloaks, practical things. Nothing that screams Duchess, nothing with the Darnell crest. Can you do that without telling anyone? Ma'am, I don't understand. Can you do it, Margaret? The maid stared at her. Elena watched understanding dawn in her eyes, watched shock, then something like respect cross her features. Yes, ma'am, Margaret said slowly. I can do it. Good. I'll need it ready by tomorrow night. Pack it in the servant's trunk, nothing fancy. And Margaret? Elena met her eyes. Not a word to anyone. Not the other maids, not Mrs. Blackwood, no one. Where are you going, ma'am? Elena turned back to the window. Outside, the snow was falling heavier now, covering the world. Somewhere I should have gone a long time ago. Somewhere I can breathe. The next day passed in a strange haze. Elena moved through her usual routines, morning tea in the conservatory, correspondence in her sitting room, a walk through the frozen gardens even though the cold made her fingers numb. She spoke to Mrs. Blackwood about menus for next week, knowing she wouldn't be there to eat them. She approved household expenses she'd never see spent. She smiled at servants who would soon wonder where she'd gone, and all the while, this plan formed in her mind with increasing clarity. Her Aunt Cecilia lived in a small village called Thornwick, 3 days' ride north. Elena hadn't seen her in 5 years, not since the wedding. Aunt Cecilia had been the only one who'd questioned the marriage, who'd asked Elena privately if this was really what she wanted. You're not answering, Cecilia had said, studying Elena's face at the wedding breakfast. That tells me everything. But Elena had gone through with it anyway. Because what choice did she have? A 20-year-old woman with no fortune of her own, parents who saw her as a bargaining chip, and a society that measured her worth by who she married. Well, she'd been that woman once. She wasn't anymore. That evening, Elena wrote 3 letters in her chambers. The fire was burning low. Margaret had already packed the trunk and smuggled it to the servants' passage. Everything was ready. The first letter was to her parents, brief and formal. Mother and Father, I am leaving Ironvale. Do not look for me. I am safe and will contact you when I'm ready. Until then, consider this my resignation from the role you chose for me. Elena. The second was to Aunt Cecilia. Dearest Aunt, I need sanctuary. I'm coming home to Thornwick, if you'll have me. I know it's been years since we've spoken. I know I made choices you disagreed with. You were right about everything. I'm bringing very little, but I'm carrying something precious. I'll explain when I arrive. Please don't turn me away. With love, Elena. The third letter took the longest. It was addressed to Victor, and Elena rewrote it 4 times before she was satisfied. The words had to be perfect, final, absolute. Victor, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. Don't follow me. Don't send anyone looking. I'm not running away. I'm choosing something different, something better. You'll hear from my solicitor regarding the dissolution of this marriage. I want nothing from you except my freedom. Keep the title, the estate, the precious Darnell legacy. Keep Vivian, too, if she makes you happy. I hope she does. I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for. There's something you should know, though I doubt it will matter to you. I'm carrying your child, your heir, the son or daughter you said you wanted, but they'll grow up far from Ironvale. They'll grow up knowing they were wanted, valued, loved, all the things you never learned to give. I won't raise them in the shadow of your regrets. I won't teach them that marriage is endurance. I won't let them watch their mother fade away like your own mother did. You said you wished you'd had a choice. Now you do. You can marry whoever you want. Be happy, Victor. Just do it far away from me. I'm not asking for your blessing or your permission. I'm not asking for anything. I'm simply telling you, I'm done. Elena. She sealed it with wax, but no crest. Left it on her writing desk where he'd find it eventually. Tomorrow, maybe, or the day after. Whenever he bothered to check on his wife. The snow had stopped, but the grounds were covered in white. Everything looked clean, new, like the world had been given a fresh start. Elena stood at her window one last time, memorizing the view. The frozen gardens where she'd walked alone for 2 years. The distant tree line, the lights of the village beyond the estate walls. All of it beautiful in its way. All of it a prison. Somewhere in this house, Victor was probably in his study, Or perhaps meeting Vivian in some secret corner they thought no one knew about, planning their future while assuming Elena would simply accept her place. It didn't matter anymore. Margaret knocked softly. "It's ready, ma'am. The trunk is in the servants' passage like you asked. I also packed some bread and cheese. For the journey." "Thank you." Elena turned to face her maid. The girl was barely 22, had been with her since the wedding, had watched the marriage crumble in real time. "I need one more thing from you." "Anything, ma'am." "In 2 hours, I need you to create a distraction. Drop something in the main hall. Break something expensive if you have to. Make a fuss. Keep the staff busy for 10 minutes. Can you do that?" Margaret's eyes widened with understanding. "You're really doing this?" "Yes. They'll look for you. The Duke will—" "Let him look. Let them all look. They won't find me." "What should I tell them when they ask where you've gone?" Elena considered. "Tell them the truth. That I packed a trunk and left. That I seemed calm. That I didn't seem distressed or coerced. That I chose this." Margaret nodded slowly. "They'll blame me for not stopping you." "Probably. I don't care." Margaret straightened her shoulders. "You deserve better than this, ma'am. We all know it. Even Mrs. Blackwood said so." Elena felt something warm bloom in her chest. Gratitude, maybe. Or hope. "Thank you, Margaret, for everything." At 11 o'clock that night, somewhere in the East Wing, glass shattered. Margaret's voice rose in distress, calling for help. Servants rushed toward the commotion, footsteps thundering through the halls. Elena slipped out through the servants' entrance at the back of the house. The air was bitter cold, sharp enough to make her eyes water. Her trunk was already loaded onto a small cart she'd arranged with a stable boy who asked no questions for 3 gold coins, more money than he'd see in 6 months. She wore a plain wool cloak over a simple traveling dress. No jewels except her mother's locket, which she'd owned before the marriage. No silk, no embroidery, nothing that marked her as the Duchess of Ironvale. The stable boy, Thomas, barely 15 with a face full of freckles, stared at her with wide eyes. "You sure about this, ma'am? It's a long way to anywhere in this weather." "I'm sure. Can you drive a cart?" "Yes, ma'am, but where?" "Thornwick. 3 days north. I'll pay you double when we get there if you ask no more questions." Thomas nodded slowly. "Yes, ma'am." "Then let's go." The cart rolled forward, wheels crunching through fresh snow. The sound was loud in the quiet night. Any moment someone might look out a window, might see them leaving, might raise an alarm. But no one did. Elena didn't look back at Ironvale Estate. Didn't give Victor or Vivian or the cold, beautiful prison she was leaving a second glance. She kept her eyes forward, on the road ahead, on the darkness that would swallow them whole. The winter night was vast and empty. The cart moved slowly through the snow, Thomas hunched on the driver's seat, Elena wrapped in her cloak in the back. Her breath formed clouds in the freezing air. Her hands were already numb despite her gloves. But for the first time in 2 years, Elena Harrow felt like she could breathe. Behind her, in the great house of Ironvale, light still burned in the windows. Servants cleaned up broken glass. Margaret answered questions with carefully chosen words. And in his study, Victor Darnell sat with his ledgers and his brandy, completely unaware that his world was about to change. By tomorrow, he'd find the letter. By the next day, he'd realize she was truly gone. By the end of the week, he'd have to explain to society why his duchess had vanished without a trace. But that was his problem now, not hers. The cart rolled on through the darkness, carrying Elena toward something uncertain but undeniably hers. Toward a life she'd chosen instead of accepted. Toward a future where she was more than a title, more than a disappointed husband's regret. The snow began to fall again, covering their tracks. And Elena smiled. The journey to Thornwick took 4 days instead of 3. On the second night, Thomas came down with a fever. Elena found him shivering in the barn where they'd taken shelter, his face flushed red despite the cold. She made him drink water boiled with pine needles, something Aunt Cecilia had taught her years ago, and wrapped him in both their cloaks while she kept watch. "I'm sorry, ma'am," he mumbled through chattering teeth. "I'm slowing you down." "Rest," Elena said. "We'll move when you're better." She didn't sleep that night. Instead, she sat by the small fire she'd managed to build, feeding it twigs and dried grass, watching the flames dance. Her back ached. Her feet were blistered from walking alongside the cart to spare the horse. The pregnancy made everything harder. She was nauseous most mornings and exhausted by midday. But she felt more alive than she had in 2 years. By the time they reached Thornwick, Elena's fine traveling dress was mud-stained and torn at the hem. Her hair had come loose from its pins. Her hands were raw from handling reins and firewood. She looked nothing like a duchess. She looked like someone who'd survived. The village was smaller than she remembered. A single main street lined with stone cottages, smoke rising from their chimneys. A church at one end, a tavern at the other. Fields stretching out beyond, brown and frozen under the winter sky. Aunt Cecilia's cottage sat at the edge of the village, separated from the others by a small copse of bare trees. It was exactly as Elena remembered. Rough stone walls, a thatched roof that needed repair, windows that glowed warm with firelight. "This is it," Elena told Thomas. "Wait here." She approached the door on unsteady legs, raised her hand to knock, hesitated. What if Cecilia turned her away? What if the letter hadn't arrived? What if... The door opened before she could knock. Aunt Cecilia stood there, older than Elena remembered, but unmistakably the same. Wild gray hair, sharp blue eyes, a face that had never learned to hide what it felt. She looked at Elena for a long moment, taking in the ruined dress, the exhausted face, the protective way Elena's hand rested on her stomach. "Took you long enough," Cecilia said. Then she pulled Elena into her arms. Elena broke. Right there on the doorstep, she broke. 2 years of held-back tears came pouring out. Her shoulders shook. Her breath came in ragged gasps. Cecilia held her through all of it, one hand stroking her hair, murmuring words Elena couldn't quite hear. "Come inside," Cecilia said finally. "You look half frozen. Is that boy with you?" "Thomas. He's sick. Fever. Bring him in too. I'm not letting anyone die on my doorstep." The cottage was warm and cluttered. Books everywhere, stacked on tables, piled in corners, lining makeshift shelves. A fire crackling in the hearth. The smell of bread baking. It was chaotic and lived in and absolutely nothing like Ironvale. Elena loved it immediately. Cecilia put Thomas in the small bedroom, dosed him with something that smelled terrible, and ordered him to sleep. Then she sat Elena down at the kitchen table and poured tea without asking if she wanted any. "Now," Cecilia said, "tell me everything." So Elena did. All of it. The cold marriage, the separate bedrooms, Vivienne, the conversation she'd overheard, Victor's wish that he'd had a choice, the decision to leave, the pregnancy. Cecilia listened without interrupting. When Elena finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "You did the right thing," she said finally. "Did I? I abandoned my marriage, left my husband without explanation. I'm carrying his child, and he doesn't even know." "He knows now. You left him a letter. A letter isn't the same as what? Standing there while he humiliates you, raising a child in that mausoleum while he parades his mistress around?" Cecilia's voice was sharp. "You did the right thing, Elena. The only thing. And anyone who says different can answer to me." Elena felt something loosen in her chest. "Thank you. Don't thank me yet. You're not going to like what comes next." "What comes next?" Cecilia leaned forward. "The village is going to know who you are within a week, probably less. And when they do, there will be talk, lots of it. Some will sympathize, most won't. A duchess running away from her husband, carrying his child? That's scandal, Elena. That's gossip for months. I don't care what they think. You will when they refuse to sell you bread, when they cross the street to avoid you, when they whisper about you in church." Cecilia's eyes were kind but firm. "I'm not trying to scare you. I'm trying to prepare you. This won't be easy." "Nothing about the last 2 years has been easy." "Fair point." Over the next few days, Elena settled into a routine. She woke early, helped Cecilia with the cottage, learned to cook simple meals on the hearth. Thomas recovered and returned to Ironvale with his payment and a message for Margaret. "Tell her I'm safe." But Elena suspected he'd tell everyone who asked. Word would spread. The Duke's wife had run away to Thornwick. She was right. On the 6th day, the vicar's wife appeared at the door. Mrs. Pemberton was a round woman with a pinched mouth and eyes that missed nothing. "Miss Harrow," she said, deliberately using Elena's maiden name, "I heard you'd returned to the village. Such a surprise." Mrs. Pemberton, how kind of you to visit. The woman's eyes swept over Elena's simple dress, her loose hair, the cottage behind her. I must say, this is quite a change from Ironvale Estate. Are you visiting long? I'm staying. Staying? But what about your husband? The Duke must be beside himself. The Duke will manage. Mrs. Pemberton's eyebrows shot up. Surely you don't mean to… That is, you can't possibly be suggesting… I'm suggesting nothing. I'm stating fact. I've left my marriage and I'm staying here. The silence was thick enough to cut. Mrs. Pemberton's face went through several expressions: shock, disapproval, barely concealed glee at having such excellent gossip. I see, she said finally. Well, I'm sure the village will be very interested to hear about this. She left quickly after that, practically running down the path. That went well, Cecilia said from the kitchen doorway. She'll tell everyone. Oh, absolutely. By tomorrow morning, you'll be the talk of every breakfast table in Thornwick. Elena sank into a chair. Maybe this was a mistake. Maybe I should have gone somewhere no one knows me, somewhere I could start fresh. And where would that be? Another village where they'd ask questions about a pregnant woman with no husband? A city where you'd be alone? At least here you have me. For now. Cecilia frowned. What's that supposed to mean? It means that associating with me will ruin your reputation too. People will stop buying from you. They'll… Let them. Cecilia's voice was fierce. I've been the village eccentric for 20 years. I live alone. I read too much. I speak my mind too often. They already think I'm strange. Your presence changes nothing. It changes everything. Then let it change. I'm not turning you out, Elena. Not now. Not ever. By the end of the week, Cecilia's prediction came true. The whispers started. Elena felt them when she walked to the village well for water. Saw them in the sidelong glances from women she'd known as a child. Heard them in the sudden silences when she entered the general store. Duchess Darnell, the shopkeeper said, his tone carefully neutral. What can I do for you? Just Elena, please. I need flour and salt. He packed them slowly, avoiding eye contact. That'll be twice the usual price. Elena stared at him. Twice? Why? Delivery costs. Everything's more expensive these days. I've lived in this village. I know what things cost. The shopkeeper shrugged. Times change. You can take it or leave it. Elena paid. She had no choice. But she felt the weight of it, the punishment for stepping out of line, for embarrassing a duke, for choosing herself. The next week was worse. Someone threw a stone through Cecilia's window, left a note. Harboring sinners brings judgment. The baker refused to sell to Elena directly, though he'd sell to Cecilia. The vicar stopped by to suggest Elena might want to seek guidance through prayer and return to her husband before she brought shame upon the village. The village has enough shame of its own, Cecilia told him. Maybe focus on that. But the pressure kept building. Women crossed the street when Elena approached. Children were pulled away from her. Someone started a rumor that she'd been unfaithful, that the baby wasn't Victor's at all. Ignore them, Cecilia said. They'll tire of it eventually. But Elena wasn't sure they would, and she wasn't sure she could endure it. She'd escaped one prison only to find herself in another, one made of judgment and whispers instead of cold stone. One afternoon, 3 weeks after her arrival, Elena was walking back from the well when a group of women blocked her path. 5 of them, led by Mrs. Pemberton. We need to discuss something, Mrs. Pemberton said. Then discuss it. The village council has concerns about your situation. We have standards here, morals. We can't have someone of your background setting a bad example for our young women. Elena felt ice in her veins. What exactly are you suggesting? That perhaps Thornwick isn't the right place for you, that you might be happier elsewhere. You want me to leave? We think it would be best for everyone. Elena looked at the women, saw the certainty in their faces, the righteousness. They genuinely believed they were protecting their community by driving her out. No, Elena said. I beg your pardon? No. I'm not leaving. I've done nothing wrong. I left a marriage that was destroying me. That's not a crime. It's not a sin. It's survival. You abandoned your husband, one of the other women said. That's the very definition of sin. My husband abandoned me first. He just did it while we were living under the same roof. Mrs. Pemberton's face flushed. We don't need to hear the sordid details of your marriage. We need you to understand that your presence here is disruptive, scandalous. The children ask questions. The young women get ideas. It's not appropriate. Ideas? Elena's voice rose. What ideas? That they don't have to accept being treated like furniture? That marriage should involve respect? That they're worth more than whoever their parents sell them to? How dare you? No, how dare you? Elena stepped forward. The women stepped back. You want to punish me for leaving a man who humiliated me? For protecting my unborn child? For choosing myself? Fine. Gossip all you want. Refuse to sell me bread, throw stones through my aunt's window. But I'm not leaving. I'm staying right here, and if that makes you uncomfortable, maybe you should ask yourself why. She pushed past them, her heart pounding, her hands shaking. Behind her, Mrs. Pemberton called out, Your husband will come for you. When he does, you'll regret this. Elena didn't look back, but the words followed her home like ghosts. That night, Elena couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about what Mrs. Pemberton had said. Your husband will come for you. Would he? Did Victor even care enough to look, or was he relieved to be rid of her? You're thinking too loud, Cecilia said from the doorway. I can hear it from my room. Sorry. Cecilia came in, carrying 2 cups of tea. She handed one to Elena and sat on the edge of the bed. Talk to me. What if they're right? What if I'm being selfish? I'm bringing all this trouble on you, on the village. Stop. Stop right there. Cecilia's voice was firm. You're not being selfish. You're being human. You're protecting yourself and your child. That's not selfishness. That's courage. It doesn't feel like courage. It feels like running away. Running away is when you flee from responsibility. You're running toward something, toward a life where you're not slowly dying inside. That's different. Elena sipped her tea. It was too hot and burned her tongue, but she didn't care. I heard you, the night before my wedding, arguing with my mother. Cecilia went still. Did you? You told her she was making a mistake, that I was too young, that the marriage was wrong. She said you didn't understand how the world worked. Your mother and I never agreed on much. You were right. About everything. Elena looked at her aunt. Why didn't you fight harder? Why didn't you stop me? Cecilia was quiet for a long moment. Because you were 20 years old and terrified of disappointing your parents. Because I knew that if I pushed too hard, you'd just dig in deeper. Because sometimes people have to make their own mistakes. She paused. And because I was a coward. I should have fought harder, should have given you a place to run to before you married him. I've regretted it every day since. Don't, I made my choice. And now you've made a different one. That takes strength, Elena. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. The next morning brought a new problem. Elena woke to find Cecilia in the kitchen, staring at a letter. What's wrong? Cecilia looked up. Her face was grim. This arrived at dawn. Special courier. Elena took the letter. The seal was unmistakable. The Darnell crest. Her hands shook as she broke it open. Elena, I received your letter. I've also received word of your whereabouts from various sources. We need to speak. I'm coming to Thornwick. I'll arrive in 3 days. This situation cannot continue. There are matters that must be discussed in person, legal matters, family matters. I expect you to be there when I arrive. Victor Elena read it twice, then a third time. He's coming, she said. So it seems. He says I need to be there, that he expects it. Cecilia's eyes flashed. Does he now? And what do you expect? Elena looked at the letter again, at Victor's precise handwriting, his cold, formal tone, his assumption that she'd comply with his demands simply because he'd made them. Something inside her hardened. I expect, Elena said slowly, that he's going to be disappointed. Over the next 3 days, Elena prepared. Not for Victor's arrival, for his departure, because he was coming to take her back, and she was going to make it absolutely clear that wasn't happening. She started by visiting the village solicitor, a nervous man named Mr. Hewitt, who nearly fainted when she walked into his office. Your Grace, this is highly irregular. I need legal counsel. That's what you do, isn't it? Well, yes, but in matters of divorce, especially between nobles, I'm not asking you to file anything yet. I just need to know my options. What are my rights? Can he force me to return? Mr. Hewitt shuffled papers nervously. Legally, a husband has certain, that is, the law gives him authority over, but circumstances matter, and if you can prove, it's complicated. Make it simple. He swallowed hard. If you can prove adultery, you might have grounds for separation, but you'd need witnesses, evidence. It's difficult and expensive and would cause a tremendous scandal. What if I just refuse to go back? He could petition the courts, claim you're unstable. Have you committed? Elena felt cold. Committed? To where? There are institutions for women who are deemed unfit, hysterical, unable to manage their own affairs. I'm pregnant, not insane. The law doesn't always distinguish, ma'am, especially when a duke is involved. Mr. Hewitt looked genuinely distressed. I'm sorry. I wish I had better news. Elena left his office feeling sick. The law was against her. Society was against her. Even here in this small village, she wasn't safe. But she wasn't giving up. The morning Victor was due to arrive, Elena dressed carefully. Not in the fine gown she'd left behind, but in one of Cecilia's simple dresses, altered to fit. She braided her hair herself, wore no jewelry except her mother's locket. She looked like a villager, not a duchess. That was the point. Victor's carriage arrived at noon, pulled by 4 horses, attended by 2 footmen. The whole village turned out to watch. Elena stood in front of Cecilia's cottage, her aunt beside her, and waited. Victor stepped down from the carriage, and for a moment, Elena forgot how to breathe. He looked exactly the same. Tall, handsome, cold. He wore traveling clothes, but they were immaculate, perfectly tailored, expensive. He looked at her, and his expression was unreadable. Elena. Victor. They stood 10 feet apart, a gulf of more than distance between them. We need to talk, he said. Privately. Anything you have to say, you can say here. His jaw tightened. This is not a conversation for an audience. I disagree. He glanced at Cecilia, then at the villagers watching from the street. You're making a spectacle of yourself. Am I? Or are you the one who brought the spectacle with you? Elena gestured at the carriage, the footmen, the horses. You could have come quietly. Instead, you arrived like you're claiming territory. I came to bring my wife home. I'm not your wife anymore. Legally, you are. The law doesn't care that you have a mistress. It doesn't care that you wished you'd never married me. It doesn't care that you made me feel like a ghost in my own home. Elena's voice was steady, clear. But I care, and I'm not going back. Victor stepped closer, lowered his voice. You're carrying my child. I'm carrying a child, my child, who will be raised far from Ironvale. That's my heir. That's my baby. Something flickered in his eyes. Anger, maybe, or desperation. Elena, be reasonable. You can't stay here. Look around you. This is a village. You're a duchess. You have responsibilities, obligations, a life. I had a life. It was killing me. So I chose a different one. This isn't a life. This is poverty, exile. This is freedom. Victor stared at her. For the first time since she'd known him, he looked genuinely lost, like he'd prepared for every possibility except this one, that she might actually mean it. I'm not leaving without you, he said finally. Then I hope you like Thornwick. It's lovely in spring. She turned to go back inside. Victor grabbed her arm. The touch was firm, not painful, but Elena froze. Let go of me, she said quietly. Not until you listen. Let go, the crowd murmured. Cecilia stepped forward. You heard her. Victor released her arm, but his eyes blazed. This isn't over. Yes, Elena said. It is. She walked inside and closed the door. Her hands were shaking. Her heart was racing. But she'd done it. She'd faced him, refused him, stood her ground. Through the window, she watched Victor stand there for a long moment. Then he climbed back into his carriage and drove away. But she had a sinking feeling he'd be back. She was right, but not in the way she expected. Victor didn't return. Instead, 3 days later, a different carriage arrived. This one was smaller, unmarked, pulled by 2 ordinary horses. A man stepped out, middle-aged, expensively dressed, but not ostentatious. He carried a leather satchel and walked with the confidence of someone used to being obeyed. Elena watched from the window as he approached the cottage. Cecilia was at the door before he could knock. "Can I help you?" "I'm looking for Elena Harrow, or should I say the Duchess of Iron Vale." "She's not receiving visitors." "I'm not a visitor. I'm her husband's solicitor, Mr. Edmund Cross. I have legal documents that require her attention." Elena came to the door. "What kind of documents?" Mr. Cross looked at her with the detached assessment of someone evaluating livestock. "May we speak inside? This is a delicate matter." "Anything you have to say, you can say here." He sighed, clearly annoyed, but opened his satchel. "Very well. The Duke has petitioned the courts for an annulment of your marriage on the grounds of abandonment and mental instability. He's also filing for custody of the unborn child. These are the preliminary papers. You're being summoned to appear before a magistrate in Millbrook in 2 weeks." The words hit Elena like stones. "Mental instability? That's absurd." "Is it? You abandoned your home without warning, left no forwarding address, refused to return when requested. The Duke has 3 physicians willing to testify that such behavior indicates a disturbed mind." Mr. Cross pulled out another document. "He's also petitioning to have you examined by a court-appointed doctor to determine your fitness as a mother." "He can't do this." "He already has. The law is quite clear. A husband has the right to seek legal remedies when his wife behaves erratically." Mr. Cross's tone was professional, but his eyes held something else. Pity, maybe, or contempt. "I'm required to inform you that if you fail to appear, the court will rule in his favor by default. You'll lose all claim to the child and any financial support." Cecilia grabbed the papers from his hands. "Get off my property." "I'm just the messenger, madam." "Then deliver your message and leave." Mr. Cross tipped his hat. "Good day, ladies. I'll see you in court." He left, and Elena felt her legs give out. She sat down hard on the doorstep, the world spinning. "That bastard," Cecilia breathed, reading through the documents. "That absolute bastard. He's trying to have you declared insane so he can take the baby." "Can he do that? Legally? With enough money and influence?" "Yes. He can do almost anything." Cecilia's face was pale. "Elena, this is serious. If the court rules against you, they could commit you. Take the child the moment it's born. You'd have no rights, no recourse." Elena pressed her hands against her stomach. The baby was moving more now, small flutters that reminded her what was at stake. "What do I do?" "Fight. We fight." But fighting required money. Resources. Things Elena didn't have. Over the next few days, she tried to find a solicitor willing to represent her. Mr. Hewitt refused outright. "Too risky, too political, I'm sorry." 3 others in neighboring towns said the same. No one wanted to oppose a duke. Finally, in a town 2 days' ride away, she found someone. Miss Harriet Vaughn, a woman in her 50s who practiced law from a cramped office above a bakery. She was one of the few women solicitors in the region, and she had a reputation for taking cases no one else would touch. "I'll be honest with you," Miss Vaughn said after Elena explained the situation. "Your chances aren't good. The law heavily favors husbands, especially wealthy titled ones. But it's not impossible. What would it take?" "Evidence. Proof that he's the one who violated the marriage, not you. Witnesses who can testify to his adultery, documentation of his neglect. Anything that shows you left because the situation was untenable, not because you are unstable." "I have a letter. He wrote that he wished he'd had a choice in marrying me." "That might help, but it's not enough. We need more. We need his mistress to testify, or someone who saw them together in compromising circumstances." Elena thought about Vivian, the woman who'd been so confident, so certain of her place in Victor's life. She'd never testify against him. "Then we need to find another way." Miss Vaughn leaned forward. "I'm going to ask you something difficult. How badly do you want to win this?" "I'd do anything to protect my child." "Anything is a dangerous word. But all right, here's what I propose. We go on the offensive. We don't just defend against his claims. We attack. We make it public. Make it ugly. Force him to answer questions he doesn't want to answer." "How?" "We call witnesses. Servants from Iron Vale who saw his relationship with Lady Ashford. We subpoena his correspondence. We make him explain why his wife felt she had no choice but to leave." Miss Vaughn's eyes were sharp. "It won't be pleasant. It'll be a scandal. But it might be your only shot. Elena thought about the servants, Margaret, Mrs. Blackwood, people who'd been kind to her but who also depended on Victor for their livelihoods. I can't ask them to risk their positions. Then you'll lose. The words were brutal, but true. Elena sat in silence, weighing her options. Risk the people who'd shown her kindness, or risk losing her child forever. All right, she said finally. Do it. But before Miss Vaughn could file the papers, something happened that changed everything. Elena woke one morning to the smell of smoke. Not the comforting smell of a cooking fire, but something harsher, acrid, wrong. She stumbled out of bed, her pregnant belly making her movements awkward. The cottage was still dark, too early for dawn. But through the window she could see orange light flickering against the sky. Cecilia! Her aunt was already up, standing at the window with her hand pressed against the glass. The workshop. Cecilia had a small workshop behind the cottage where she restored old manuscripts and books. It was her livelihood, her passion, the thing she'd built over 20 years, and it was on fire. They ran outside. The workshop was fully engulfed, flames shooting through the roof. The heat was intense even from 30 feet away. Inside were decades of work, rare books, tools, everything Cecilia owned. No, Cecilia breathed. No, no, no. She started toward the building. Elena grabbed her arm. You can't go in there. My work, everything I have, it's gone. It's already gone. They stood helpless, watching it burn. Neighbors came running with buckets, but it was too late. By the time the fire died down, there was nothing left but smoking ruins and ash. The village constable arrived at dawn. He walked around the remains, poking at charred timbers with a stick. Looks like it started near the back, where you keep your lamp oil. I don't keep lamp oil there, Cecilia said. Her voice was flat, exhausted. Too dangerous around old paper. Then how'd it start? Someone said it. Elena said it before she could stop herself. The constable looked at her. That's a serious accusation, ma'am. Someone has been throwing stones at our windows, leaving threatening notes. This is the next step. You have proof? Not of the fire, but then I can't help you. The constable tipped his hat. I'm sorry about your workshop, Miss Harrow. Accidents happen. He left, and Cecilia sank to the ground amid the ashes. Elena sat beside her, both of them staring at the destruction. 20 years, Cecilia whispered. 20 years of work, gone. We'll rebuild. With what money? I had 3 commissions in there, all ruined, and the tools. Some of those tools were my mother's, irreplaceable. Elena felt rage building in her chest. Someone had done this. Someone in this village who thought they were punishing sin, protecting morality, maintaining standards. Someone who'd decided that driving them out was worth destroying everything. I'm leaving, Elena said suddenly. Cecilia looked at her. What? This is my fault. I brought this on you. If I leave, they'll stop. They'll leave you alone. Don't be stupid. Where would you go? I don't know. Somewhere else, somewhere far away where Victor can't find me and the village can't judge me. And the court date? The custody battle? I'll forfeit. He can have the annulment. I just want my baby and my freedom. Cecilia grabbed her shoulders. Listen to me. If you run now, you lose everything. He'll use it as proof you're unstable. The court will rule against you. They'll take the baby the moment it's born, and you'll never see it again. Is that what you want? No, but I can't let you lose everything because of me. This isn't just about you anymore. Cecilia's voice cracked. You think I'm helping you out of charity? Out of family obligation? I'm helping you because what you're doing matters. You're standing up to a system that crushes women, that tells us we have to endure, to accept, to smile through misery. Someone has to fight back. Someone has to say no. And right now, that someone is you. I'm tired of fighting. I know, but you don't get to be tired yet. Not when you're this close. Elena wanted to argue, but she was too exhausted, too scared, too aware that every decision she made now had consequences she couldn't control. The next day, Mrs. Pemberton appeared at the cottage with 2 other women from the village council. They looked at the burned workshop with satisfaction barely concealed. Such a tragedy, Mrs. Pemberton said, her voice dripping false sympathy. I hope this convinces you to reconsider your position. My position? Elena stepped forward. You mean my refusal to be run out of town for the crime of leaving a bad marriage? We mean your insistence on staying where you're not welcome, bringing scandal and now destruction. I didn't destroy that workshop. Didn't you? Sin brings consequences, Miss Harrow. We warned you. Elena felt something snap inside her. You want to talk about sin? Let's talk about it. Let's talk about how you preach charity while refusing to sell me food. How you claim to be protecting children while teaching them to throw stones at pregnant women. How you invoke morality while burning down buildings. We had nothing to do with that fire. Didn't you? Or did you just create the atmosphere where someone felt justified doing it, where they thought they were doing the right thing? Mrs. Pemberton's face flushed red. You have no right to speak to us this way. I have every right. This is my home now. Mine and my child's. And I'm not leaving. Then you're a fool. The Duke is coming for you. When he does, we'll make sure the court knows exactly what kind of woman you are. Unstable, hostile, unfit to raise a child. She left with her companions, and Elena realized the full scope of what she was facing. The village wasn't just gossiping anymore. They were actively working against her, would testify against her, would do everything possible to make sure Victor won. That night, Elena couldn't sleep. She paced the cottage, her mind racing. The court date was in 10 days. She had no witnesses, no evidence, no way to prove Victor's adultery or his neglect. And now she had an entire village ready to paint her as dangerous and unstable. She was going to lose. Unless. The idea came to her slowly, like dawn creeping over a dark landscape. Dangerous, reckless, possibly suicidal, but it might work. Cecilia, Elena said, shaking her aunt awake, I need you to trust me. What? What's wrong? I'm going to do something that might make everything worse or might save us, but I need you to promise you won't try to stop me. Cecilia sat up, suddenly alert. What are you planning? I'm going to Ironvale. Are you insane? That's exactly what he wants. Not to stay, to get proof, real proof. Vivienne's been there for months. She must have left something, letters, gifts, anything that proves the affair. If I can find it, we have leverage. You can't just walk into Ironvale and search the place. Victor's staff will... The staff likes me, or they did. Some of them might help. Elena was talking faster now, the plan taking shape. Margaret said she'd help if I needed it, and Mrs. Blackwood, she told me I deserved better. Maybe she meant it. This is too dangerous. If Victor finds you there, he won't. He's in London preparing for the court case. I checked. His solicitor mentioned it. The estate is empty except for staff. Cecilia stared at her. You're serious? Completely. You could be arrested for trespassing, or worse, he could use it to prove you're unstable. Breaking into your former home, it's not breaking in if I have a key. Elena pulled out a small brass key she'd kept in her locket. The servant's entrance, I never gave it back. Elena, I have to try. If I don't, I lose my baby, and I can't... Her voice broke. I can't lose this child. It's the only good thing to come from that marriage. The only thing that's completely mine. I'll do anything to protect it. Cecilia was quiet for a long moment. Then she sighed. When do we leave? We? You think I'm letting you do this alone? You're 6 months pregnant and plotting a break-in. You need backup. It's too dangerous. So is everything else we've done. At least this way, we're doing it together. They left before dawn the next day, taking a hired cart and telling no one where they were going. The journey to Ironvale took 2 days. Elena spent the time rehearsing what she'd say to Margaret, to Mrs. Blackwood, to anyone who might help. Spent the nights worrying about what would happen if they were caught. They arrived at Ironvale at dusk. The estate looked exactly as Elena remembered. Cold, imposing, beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with warmth. Lights burned in some of the windows. Smoke rose from chimneys. Life continued here as if she'd never existed. They approached through the woods behind the estate, staying out of sight. Elena's heart was pounding so hard she thought it might wake the dead. Her hand shook as she fitted the key into the servant's entrance. It still worked. Inside, the corridor was dark and quiet. Elena had been through here 100 times, knew every turn, every doorway. She led Cecilia quickly, quietly, toward the main house. They needed to get to Victor's study. That's where he'd keep correspondence, and if Vivienne had written to him, when Vivienne had written to him, the letters would be there. They were halfway across the kitchen when a light appeared. Elena froze, footsteps approaching. "Hide," she whispered to Cecilia, pushing her toward the pantry. But it was too late. Mrs. Blackwood rounded the corner, candle in hand, and stopped dead. For a long moment, no one moved, no one breathed. Then Mrs. Blackwood set down the candle. Your Grace, I thought I heard something. Mrs. Blackwood, The Duke is in London. The house is quiet. I'm just doing my final rounds. The housekeeper's voice was completely neutral. I'll be heading to bed soon. I'm a very heavy sleeper. I won't hear anything that happens in the next hour. Elena stared at her. You're helping me. I'm going to bed. What you do after that is your business. Mrs. Blackwood picked up her candle. The study is unlocked. The Duke left in a hurry and forgot to secure it. Careless of him. She paused. You have 1 hour. After that, the night watchman makes his rounds. She left before Elena could thank her. Well, Cecilia breathed, that was unexpected. They hurried to the study. Inside, everything was exactly as Elena remembered. The massive desk, the leather chairs, the smell of old books and tobacco. She went straight to the desk and started opening drawers, papers, ledgers, estate documents. Nothing personal, nothing incriminating. Elena! Cecilia was at the bookshelf, holding something. Look. It was a small wooden box hidden behind a row of books. Inside were letters, dozens of them, all in the same elegant handwriting, Vivian's handwriting. Elena opened one at random, read the first few lines, felt ice spread through her veins. My darling Victor, the hours we spent yesterday were not nearly enough. When can we meet again? I grow tired of pretending in public that you mean nothing to me. Another letter. I understand your position, truly I do, but how long must we wait? She clearly makes you miserable. Perhaps if she knew about us, she'd leave on her own. And another. The emerald necklace is exquisite. I'll wear it when we meet on Thursday. The cottage by the lake, as usual? Elena gathered as many letters as she could carry. This was it. This was the proof she needed. Evidence of the affair, written in Vivian's own hand. Admission that they'd been meeting for months, that Victor had been giving her gifts, that they'd discussed ways to get rid of Elena. We need to go, Cecilia said urgently. We're running out of time. They were almost to the door when it opened. Margaret stood there, her eyes wide. Your Grace, you came back. Not to stay, just to... Elena gestured at the letters. Margaret's face hardened when she saw what Elena was holding. Good. He deserves it. After what he did, treating you like that, he deserves everything that's coming. She glanced behind her. But you need to leave now. The night watchman is early tonight. He's already in the East Wing. Thank you, Margaret, for everything. Don't thank me. Just win. Beat him. Show him he can't treat people like possessions. They made it out through the servants' entrance just as the watchman's lantern appeared in the corridor behind them. Ran through the woods, stumbling in the dark, Elena's pregnant belly making it hard to move quickly. But they made it to the cart, made it to the road, made it away. In the cart, heading back toward Thornwick, Elena clutched the letters to her chest. Her heart was still racing, her hands still shaking. But she'd done it. She had the proof she needed. That was the stupidest, most reckless thing I've ever been part of, Cecilia said. Then she laughed. I've never felt more alive. Elena laughed too, giddy with relief and terror and triumph, but the triumph was short-lived. They were 2 miles from Thornwick when they saw the flames. Orange light against the night sky, bright enough to be seen for miles. No, Elena breathed. They urged the horse faster. Raced toward the village, toward Cecilia's cottage. What was left of it? The entire structure was engulfed in flames, burning so hot they couldn't get within 50 feet. Villagers stood watching, some with buckets, most just staring. No one was fighting it. No one was trying to save it. They were letting it burn. Elena stumbled out of the cart, the letters still clutched in her hands. What happened? How did this start? Mrs. Pemberton stepped forward from the crowd. Tragic, really. These old cottages are so unsafe. Fires just happen. You did this. I was at home all evening. Many witnesses can attest to that. Mrs. Pemberton's smile was cold. Of course, if certain people would leave the village, perhaps these tragedies would stop. Elena looked at the burning cottage, at Cecilia's face, pale with shock and grief, at the villagers who watched with satisfaction or indifference, and something inside her broke, not in despair, in rage. Fine, Elena said. Her voice was loud enough to carry. You want me gone? I'll go. But not the way you think. She turned to Miss Vaughn, who'd arrived with the crowd. Can you file emergency motions with the court? Yes, but do it. Tonight. I want the court date moved up. I want it public. And I want subpoenas issued for every person in this village who's harassed us, threatened us, or stood by while our property burned. Mrs. Pemberton's smile faltered. You can't. I can. And I will. You want to testify about my character? Fine. But you'll do it under oath. And I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of Christians you are. She looked at the crowd, at faces that had once been familiar, friendly, neighbors she'd known as a child. You burned my aunt's home because you didn't like the scandal I brought, because I embarrassed your village by refusing to accept misery as my fate. Well, you're about to get more scandal than you ever imagined, because I'm not hiding anymore. I'm not ashamed, and I'm not leaving. She held up the letters. I have proof of my husband's adultery, written proof, and I'm going to use it. I'm going to drag every detail of my marriage into open court, make the Duke of Ironvale answer for his actions, and when I'm done, everyone in the county will know what happened here, how you treated a pregnant woman, how you burned her home, how you chose cruelty over compassion. The crowd murmured. Some looked uncertain now, worried. So go ahead, Elena continued. Tell the court I'm unstable, tell them I'm unfit, but I'll tell them what you did, and we'll see who they believe. She turned and walked away from the burning cottage, Cecilia beside her. They had nowhere to go, no home, no shelter. Winter was coming, and Elena was 6 months pregnant, and they'd just declared war on an entire village and a duke. But Elena felt stronger than she had in years, because she was done running, done hiding, done accepting what others decided she deserved. She was fighting back, and she wasn't going to lose. And she wasn't going to lose. They spent that night in the village tavern. The owner, Mr. Garrett, a gruff man in his 60s who'd stayed neutral during the village's campaign against Elena, took one look at the burning cottage and the two exhausted women and jerked his head toward the stairs. Room 3. It's not much, but it's warm. I'll bring food. We can pay, Elena started. Didn't ask if you could pay. Said I'd bring food. He paused, his weathered face unreadable. What they did tonight, burning a woman's home while she slept, that's not justice. That's cowardice. He left before Elena could thank him. The room was small and sparse, a bed, a chair, a washstand. But it had a door that locked and walls that weren't on fire. Cecilia sank onto the bed, staring at nothing. 20 years, she whispered. Everything I built, every manuscript I saved, gone. Elena knelt beside her aunt, wincing as her pregnant belly pressed against her knees. We'll rebuild. Somehow we'll... With what? I have no income now, no tools, no commissions, no home. Cecilia's voice was hollow. I have nothing. You have me. You're about to give birth and fight a court battle against a duke. You don't need me dragging you down. Stop. Elena grabbed her aunt's hands. You didn't drag me down. You saved me. When no one else would take me in, you did. When everyone else told me to go back, you told me to stay. You gave me courage when I had none left, so don't you dare tell me you're a burden. Cecilia's eyes filled with tears. I'm so tired, Elena. I know, me too, but we're almost there. Just a little further. A knock at the door interrupted them. Mr. Garrett entered with a tray. Bread, cheese, soup that smelled like heaven. He set it down without a word, then pulled a small pouch from his pocket. My wife wanted you to have this. She's been setting it aside. Coins from the tavern earnings. Said a woman should have something of her own, just in case. He placed the pouch on the table. It's not much, but it might help. Elena stared at the pouch, then at Mr. Garrett. Why are you helping us? Because my daughter left her husband 3 years ago. Came home with a black eye and a broken rib. The village told her to go back, that marriage was sacred, that she must have deserved it somehow. His jaw tightened. She hanged herself in my barn 2 months later. So when I see what they're doing to you, trying to break you for the crime of protecting yourself, I think of her. And I think maybe if someone had stood up for her, she'd still be here. He left, and Elena felt tears streaming down her face. Not all of them were from sadness. The next morning, Miss Vaughn arrived at the tavern before breakfast. She looked like she hadn't slept, her hair escaping its pins, her dress wrinkled. The motions are filed. Emergency hearing set for 3 days from now, and I've issued subpoenas. She pulled out a list. Mrs. Pemberton, the vicar, 3 members of the village council, and the constable who refused to investigate the fires. Will they come? They have to. It's a court order. If they don't appear, they'll be held in contempt. Miss Vaughan's smile was sharp. They wanted to testify about your character. Now they'll do it under oath, with me asking the questions. What about Victor? His solicitor tried to delay, claiming the Duke is indisposed. I told the judge that if the Duke is too indisposed to appear in court, perhaps he's too indisposed to care for a child. The judge agreed. Victor will be there. Elena felt a flutter of something that might have been fear or might have been anticipation. And the letters? Perfect. Better than I hoped. We have dates, locations, explicit descriptions of their affair. His own mistress documented everything. Miss Vaughan's eyes gleamed. He thought he was untouchable. He was wrong. Over the next 2 days, Elena prepared. Miss Vaughan coached her on how to testify, what to say, what not to say, how to stay calm when they attacked her character, how to redirect questions, how to tell her story without breaking down. They'll try to rattle you, Miss Vaughan warned. Victor's solicitor is very good. He'll paint you as hysterical, impulsive, unstable. He'll ask about the break-in at Ironvale. It wasn't a break-in. I had a key. He'll call it trespassing, theft, evidence of criminal behavior. Miss Vaughan leaned forward. You need to stay composed. Don't let him see you angry. Don't give him ammunition. What if I can't? What if I fall apart? Then you fall apart. But you get back up. Because the alternative is losing your child, and I don't think you're willing to accept that. She wasn't. The hearing was held in Millbrook, a larger town 2 hours from Thornwick. The courthouse was an imposing stone building that smelled like old wood and older secrets. Elena arrived wearing the best dress she owned, still simple, still worn, but clean and pressed. Her hair was braided simply. She wore no jewelry except her mother's locket. She looked like what she was, a woman who'd lost everything and was fighting for the only thing that mattered. The courtroom was packed. News had spread. A duchess fighting a duke for custody of an unborn child, accusations of adultery and arson. A village turned against one of its own. People had come from miles around to watch. Elena saw Mrs. Pemberton in the gallery, sitting with her council allies, saw villagers she'd known since childhood, some sympathetic, most hostile. Saw reporters with notebooks ready to document every scandal. And then she saw Victor. He sat at the front with Mr. Cross, his solicitor. He wore a perfectly tailored suit, his posture rigid, his face impassive. When their eyes met, something flickered in his expression, but it was gone before Elena could identify it. The magistrate entered, a stern-looking man in his 60s with gray mutton chops and cold eyes. Everyone stood. Be seated. We're here to consider the petition of Victor Darnell, Duke of Ironvale, for annulment of marriage and custody of an unborn child. Mr. Cross, you may begin. Victor's solicitor stood. He was smooth, confident, exactly the kind of man who'd spent his career defending the powerful. Your Honor, this is a straightforward case. The Duchess of Ironvale abandoned her home, her husband, and her responsibilities without cause or warning. She refuses to return despite repeated requests. She has shown herself to be unstable, impulsive, and unfit to raise a child of noble birth. He called his first witness, a doctor who'd never met Elena, but was willing to testify that sudden departures from home indicated mental instability. Then a household steward who said Elena had been distant and cold, never properly fulfilling her duties as Duchess. Miss Vaughan cross-examined both briefly, efficiently dismantling their credibility. The doctor admitted he'd been paid for his testimony. The steward admitted he'd been employed by Victor for 20 years and feared losing his position. Then Mr. Cross called Mrs. Pemberton. She took the stand looking righteous and certain, smoothed her skirts, folded her hands primly. Mrs. Pemberton, you've known Elena Harrow since she was a child, correct? Yes. Sweet girl once, before she got ideas above her station. Can you describe her behavior since returning to Thornwick? Erratic. Hostile. She's been causing trouble, turning the village against itself, refusing to accept guidance from her betters, acting as if the rules don't apply to her. Would you say her behavior indicates instability? Absolutely. A proper woman would have stayed with her husband, would have worked through difficulties privately. Instead, she ran away like a child and brought shame on everyone around her. Mr. Cross smiled. Thank you. No further questions. Miss Vaughn stood slowly. Mrs. Pemberton, you said Elena has been causing trouble. Can you be more specific? Well, she's been defiant, rude, refusing to leave when asked. Asked by whom? The village council. We felt her presence was disruptive. Disruptive how? Mrs. Pemberton shifted in her seat. She's a scandal. A duchess abandoning her husband. It sets a bad example. I see. And this disruption, did it manifest in any specific ways? I'm not sure what you mean. Let me be clearer. Did Miss Harrow's cottage burn down while she was living there? Yes, but that was an accident. Was it? And her aunt's workshop, that burned too, didn't it? Another accident, old buildings. 2 fires in 3 weeks, both affecting the same family. Quite a coincidence. Miss Vaughn's voice was sharp now. Mrs. Pemberton, did you or any member of the village council encourage these accidents? Certainly not. Did you throw stones through her windows? No. Did you leave threatening notes? We were trying to help her see reason. By terrorizing her, by destroying her property, by making her life so unbearable she'd have no choice but to leave? Miss Vaughn pulled out a document. I have statements from 3 villagers who say you organized a campaign to drive Miss Harrow out, that you encouraged harassment, that you said, and I quote, she'll leave when she has nowhere else to go. Mrs. Pemberton's face went red. That's out of context, is it? Because it sounds like you deliberately made a pregnant woman homeless. She brought it on herself. By leaving an unhappy marriage, that's all it takes to deserve having your home burned down? Your Honor, this is argumentative, Mr. Cross objected. Overruled. Answer the question, Mrs. Pemberton. The woman's composure cracked. She was setting a bad example, teaching young women they could just leave their husbands whenever they felt like it. We had to protect the village. Protect it from what? From the idea that women deserve to be treated with respect? From sin? From moral decay? From women having choices? Miss Vaughn's voice cut through the courtroom like a blade. That's what this is really about, isn't it? Not protecting anyone? Punishing a woman who dared to choose herself. Mrs. Pemberton didn't answer, couldn't answer. The gallery was silent. Miss Vaughn turned to the magistrate. No further questions. The next witness was the vicar. He testified about Elena's failure to attend services, her defiance of moral guidance, but under cross-examination, he admitted he'd never actually spoken to her about her marriage, had never asked if she was safe or happy or needed help. So your concern for her soul didn't extend to her well-being? Miss Vaughn asked. That's not... Spiritual matters are separate from... Yes or no, Vicar? Did you ever ask if she was being hurt? No? Thank you. One by one, Miss Vaughn dismantled Victor's case, showed that the villagers' testimony was based on prejudice, not fact, that their campaign against Elena was coordinated and cruel, that the fires were suspicious at best, criminal at worst. Then it was Elena's turn to testify. She took the stand with her heart hammering, placed her hand on the Bible, swore to tell the truth. Sat down carefully, her pregnant belly making the chair uncomfortable. Miss Vaughn started gently. Tell us about your marriage, Elena. Why did you leave? Elena took a breath. Because I was dying there. Not physically, but in every way that mattered. I was living with a man who looked at me like I was furniture, who spoke to me only when necessary, who gave his warmth and affection to someone else while treating me like an obligation. Did you try to fix the marriage? For 2 years. I tried to be a good wife, to manage the household, to fulfill my duties, to not ask for more than he was willing to give. I thought maybe it would get better, that maybe if I was patient enough, kind enough, quiet enough, he'd eventually see me as more than just a business arrangement. What changed? I overheard him with his mistress, heard him say he wished he'd had a choice about marrying me, that she made sense and I didn't, that I was just duty. Elena's voice cracked, but she pushed on, and I realized I was teaching myself to accept crumbs. I was learning to live half a life. And I was pregnant, and I thought, is this what I want to teach my child? That this is love, that this is marriage. So you left. So I left, not to hurt anyone, not to cause scandal, but to save myself and my baby. Mr. Cross stood for cross-examination. His smile was cold. Your Grace, you claim your husband neglected you, yet he provided you with a home, servants, everything you could want materially. Material things aren't the same as human connection. But they're not nothing, are they? Many women would be grateful for such comfort. I was grateful. I was also lonely. Lonely enough to abandon your responsibilities? To steal letters from your husband's private correspondence? I didn't steal them. I retrieved evidence. By breaking into his home. It was my home. I had a key. I took nothing that wasn't relevant to proving what I already knew, that he'd been unfaithful for months while accusing me of instability. You broke into the Duke's study in the middle of the night. That's the behavior of a rational woman. It's the behavior of a desperate woman with no other options. The law wouldn't help me. The church wouldn't help me. Even my own village turned against me. So yes, I took matters into my own hands. Mr. Cross paced. And these letters you claim prove adultery. How do we know they're genuine? How do we know you didn't forge them? Miss Vaughn stood. If Mr. Cross is questioning their authenticity, I'd be happy to call Lady Vivian Ashford to verify her handwriting. The courtroom erupted. Victor's face went white. Mr. Cross looked panicked. That won't be necessary, Mr. Cross said quickly. Then you accept the letters are genuine? The Duke acknowledges that he had a friendship with Lady Ashford, but a friendship? Miss Vaughn pulled out one of the letters. Let me read from this friendship. My darling Victor, last night in the cottage was heaven. I've never felt so alive as when I'm in your arms. Tell me you'll leave her. Tell me we can be together properly, not just stolen moments in the dark. She looked up. That doesn't sound like friendship, Mr. Cross. Victor stood abruptly. Your Honor, I'd like to speak. The magistrate frowned. This is highly irregular. Please, I need to say this. The courtroom went silent. Victor walked to the front, standing between the witness box and his solicitor's table. He didn't look at Elena. Couldn't. I was unfaithful to my wife, he said. His voice was rough. For 6 months, I carried on an affair with Lady Ashford. I gave her gifts, time, attention, everything I denied Elena. I told her I wished I'd had a choice about my marriage, that my wife meant nothing to me. I said all of that, and worse. He finally looked at Elena. You asked me once if I loved Vivian. I said it didn't matter. But the truth is, I didn't love her. I don't love her. I was just running away from my own disappointment. My father arranged our marriage on his deathbed. I resented it, resented you for representing everything I couldn't choose. And instead of being honest, instead of trying to build something real, I punished you for my own cowardice. Elena felt tears on her cheeks but didn't wipe them away. You're right about everything, Victor continued. The coldness, the distance, the half-life you were living. I did that to you. And when you left, I told myself I was the victim, that you'd abandoned me. But the truth is, you survived me. You did what I should have done 2 years ago. You chose honesty over comfort. He turned to the magistrate. She's not unstable. She's brave. Braver than I've ever been. And if anyone is unfit to raise a child, it's me. Because I don't know how to love people. I only know how to own them. And she deserves better than that. The baby deserves better than that. The courtroom was absolutely silent. I'm withdrawing my petition, Victor said, for annulment and for custody. I won't fight her anymore. Mr. Cross looked like he might faint. Your Grace, you can't just... I can and I am. Draw up whatever papers she needs. Give her whatever she wants. I'm done. Victor walked out of the courtroom without looking back. The magistrate cleared his throat. Well, this is unprecedented. But given the circumstances and the Duke's withdrawal, I'm ruling in favor of Mrs. Harrow. She retains all rights to the child and is free to establish residence wherever she chooses. He banged his gavel. Case dismissed. The courtroom erupted in noise. Elena sat frozen in the witness box, unable to process what had just happened. She'd won. Actually won. Miss Vaughn appeared at her side, helping her stand. "Come on, let's get you out of here before the reporters swarm." Outside, the winter air was sharp and clean. Elena stood on the courthouse steps, breathing deeply, feeling like she'd just surfaced from drowning. Cecilia rushed up and grabbed her in a fierce hug. "You did it. You actually did it." "Victor did it," he told the truth. "After you forced him to. After you stood up and fought back and didn't let them crush you." Cecilia pulled back, her eyes shining. "I'm so proud of you." People were pouring out of the courthouse now. Some avoided Elena's eyes, others nodded respectfully. Mr. Garrett pushed through the crowd with his wife, both of them smiling. "That was something," Mr. Garrett said. "Watching you face down that solicitor, watching the Duke admit his own failures. Never thought I'd see the day." His wife pressed Elena's hand. "You're welcome at the tavern as long as you need, no charge." Others approached. A farmer who'd lost his daughter to a similar situation. A seamstress who said she'd left her husband years ago and had been ostracized for it. A young woman who said Elena had given her courage to refuse a marriage her parents wanted to force on her. "You showed us it's possible," the young woman said. "To choose yourself, to fight back. Thank you." Elena felt overwhelmed. She thought she was fighting alone for just herself and her baby, but somehow, without meaning to, she'd become something more. A symbol. Proof that the system could be challenged. That evening, back at the tavern, Elena sat with Cecilia and Miss Vaughn, processing everything that had happened. "What will you do now?" Miss Vaughn asked. "I don't know. I still don't have a home, still don't have income. I'm 6 months pregnant and—" A knock at the door interrupted her. Mr. Garrett opened it to reveal Margaret, Elena's former maid from Ironvale. She was out of breath, her dress dusty from travel. "Your Grace, Elena, I had to come. After the trial, after what the Duke said, everything changed at Ironvale." "What do you mean?" "The staff is leaving, almost everyone. They said if the Duke could treat his wife that way, what would he do to them? Mrs. Blackwood resigned this morning. Half the household staff went with her." Margaret pulled out an envelope. "She sent this for you." Elena opened it. Inside was a letter and a small key. "Dear Elena, I've spent 20 years serving the Darnell family. I told myself I was doing good work, maintaining a great household. But I watched the Duke's mother fade away in that house, and I watched you start to fade too. I should have done more, should have spoken up sooner. I'm done serving men who don't know how to value people, but I'm not done serving you. The Dowager Cottage on the edge of the Ironvale estate has been empty for years. It's not large, but it's solid, private. The Duke never goes there. I have the authority to grant residence, and I'm granting it to you. It's yours for as long as you want it. You'll also find I've arranged for a small income from the household accounts. The Duke won't notice or care. It's not much, but it will keep you fed and warm. You taught me something, Elena. You taught me that survival is a choice, that we can choose dignity over comfort, truth over ease. I'm choosing now, choosing to help you however I can. With respect, Mrs. Blackwood." Elena read the letter twice, tears streaming down her face. A home, an income, a chance to rebuild. "There's more," Margaret said quietly. "The villagers, the ones who harassed you, they've been getting visits. From reporters, from other villages. People asking questions about the fires, the threats, what they did. Some are ashamed now. Some are angry they got caught. But either way, they're not burning anything else." Cecilia laughed, a sound of pure relief. "You did it. You actually changed things." "We did it," Elena corrected. "You, me, Miss Vaughn, Mrs. Blackwood, Margaret, all of us. We fought back together." That night, Elena stood at the window of her tavern room, looking out at the winter stars. Her hand rested on her belly, feeling the baby move. Strong kicks now. Determined. Like mother, like child. She'd lost so much. Her marriage, her title, her place in society. But she'd gained something more valuable. Her voice, her strength, her absolute certainty that she deserved more than scraps of affection and half a life. Tomorrow she'd go to the Dowager Cottage, start building something new. Not a duchess's life, but her own life. Messy and uncertain and completely hers. And for the first time in years, that felt like enough. More than enough. It felt like victory. It felt like victory. The Dowager Cottage sat at the eastern edge of the Ironvale estate. far enough from the main house that Elena could pretend it didn't exist. The building was smaller than she remembered. 2 floors, stone walls thick enough to withstand centuries, windows that looked out over fields instead of manicured gardens. It had been the residence of Victor's grandmother decades ago, before she died, and the place was left to gather dust. Mrs. Blackwood had sent staff ahead to clean it. When Elena and Cecilia arrived 3 days after the trial, they found fires burning in the hearths, fresh linens on the beds, and a pantry stocked with enough supplies to last weeks. "It's perfect," Cecilia said, walking through the rooms with wonder. "Small enough to manage, far enough from prying eyes. Perfect." Elena stood in what would be the nursery, her hand on her belly. The baby was due in 2 months. 2 months to prepare, to nest, to build a life worth bringing a child into. "We should get furniture," she said. "A cradle, blankets, all the things, one step at a time." Cecilia squeezed her shoulder. "First we settle in, then we plan." Over the next few weeks, Elena discovered what it meant to build something from nothing. Not a life handed to her by parents or husband, but one she constructed piece by piece with her own hands. Margaret visited weekly, bringing supplies and news from Ironvale. The Duke had retreated to London, she said. The estate was being managed by hired administrators. Most of the original staff had left for other positions. "They're saying he's changed," Margaret said one afternoon, helping Elena hang curtains in the nursery. "Quieter, more withdrawn. He dismissed Lady Ashford completely, won't see her, won't respond to her letters. Some think he's grieving." "Grieving what?" "He got exactly what he wanted, his freedom." "Maybe that's the problem. Maybe he's realizing freedom isn't the same as happiness." Margaret hesitated. "He asks about you sometimes. If you're well, if you need anything." "I don't need anything from him." "I know, but I thought you should know he's asking." Elena didn't want to think about Victor, didn't want to wonder if his courtroom confession had been real remorse or just strategy. It didn't matter anymore. He was her past. This cottage, this baby, this new life. That was her future. But the past had a way of refusing to stay buried. One morning in early March, Elena woke to voices outside. She hauled herself out of bed, 8 months pregnant now, everything was difficult, and looked out the window. Victor's carriage sat in front of the cottage, and Victor himself stood talking to Cecilia, who looked like she wanted to hit him with the broom she was holding. "Appreciate if you'd just leave," Cecilia was saying. "You've done enough. I need to speak with her, please." "She doesn't want to speak with you." "How do you know? Have you asked her?" Elena opened the window. "I'm right here. And no, I don't want to speak with you." Victor looked up. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then he took off his hat, held it in both hands like a shield. "I know I have no right to ask, but please. 5 minutes, that's all." "Why?" "Because I owe you an apology, a real one. Not performed in front of a magistrate, but said to your face." Elena considered sending him away. Would have been easy, satisfying even. But something in his face, the exhaustion, the genuine uncertainty, made her hesitate. 5 minutes. Cecilia stays. He nodded. They sat in the small parlor, Elena in the chair by the fire, Victor perched awkwardly on the edge of the sofa. Cecilia stood by the door like a guard, arms crossed. "Well," Elena said, "you have 4 minutes left." Victor looked at his hands. "I've been trying to figure out what to say for weeks, practiced speeches, wrote letters I never sent. None of it felt adequate." "Maybe because there's nothing adequate to say. Maybe." He looked up. "But I need to try. Elena, I destroyed our marriage. I blamed you for my own resentment, punished you for circumstances neither of us controlled. I was cruel in small ways every day, the distance, the coldness, the affair. I told myself it didn't matter because we were just playing roles. But you weren't playing, you were trying, and I made you feel invisible for it." Elena felt her throat tighten, but kept her voice steady. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because you deserve to hear it. Because our child deserves to know that I understand what I did wrong. And because," he paused, "because I've been living in that house alone for 2 months, and I finally understand what you felt all along. The emptiness, the silence, the slow suffocation of a life half-lived. Good. Now you know. It's not good. It's hell. And I put you through it for 2 years. Victor's hands clenched on his hat. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not asking for anything. I just needed you to know that I see it now. I see what I did, and I'm sorry." The room was quiet except for the crackling fire. Elena studied Victor's face, looking for manipulation, for strategy. But all she saw was exhaustion and something that looked like genuine remorse. "What about Vivian?" she asked. "Gone. I ended it the day after the trial. Told her I'd been using her as an escape from my own failures, and that wasn't fair to either of us." "How did she take it?" "Badly. She said I was throwing away my only chance at happiness. I told her I'd never been happy with her, just distracted. There's a difference." Elena shifted in her chair, the baby pressing against her ribs. "And now? What do you want now? To be better, to be someone our child doesn't have to apologize for." Victor met her eyes. "I'm not asking to be part of your life, Elena, but I'd like to be part of theirs. Not as a duke dictating terms, but as a father trying to earn the privilege. That's not a decision I can make alone. The baby will decide someday what kind of relationship they want with you. I know, and I'll accept whatever they choose." He stood, placed an envelope on the table. "That's a trust. For the child. And for you. Managed independently, no strings attached. You'll never have to ask me for anything." Elena didn't touch it. "I don't want your money. It's not mine. It's theirs. Every child deserves security, regardless of what their parents did to each other." He moved toward the door, then stopped. "You're going to be a wonderful mother. You're already stronger and braver than I'll ever be. Our child is lucky to have you." He left before Elena could respond. Cecilia came and sat beside her. "Are you all right?" "I don't know, that was unexpected. People can change. Sometimes." Cecilia picked up the envelope, opened it. Her eyes widened. "Elena, this is more than comfortable. This is independent wealth. I don't want to owe him anything." "You don't. This is his debt to you, not the other way around. Take it. Use it. Build something amazing." Elena stared at the papers. Part of her wanted to tear them up, throw them in Victor's face, prove she didn't need anything from him. But another part, the practical part that was about to become a mother, recognized this for what it was. Not charity, restitution. "All right," she said finally, "but on my terms. I'll use it, but not for myself. For something bigger." "Like what?" An idea was forming in Elena's mind. Fragile, audacious, possibly insane. "The workshop. Cecilia, what if we rebuilt it? But not just for you. What if we made it a place where women could learn a trade? Book restoration, manuscript work, skills that could give them independence." Cecilia's face lit up. "Like a school?" "More than a school. A refuge. A place where women who need to leave bad situations could come, learn a skill, earn money, build a life." Elena was talking faster now, the idea taking shape. "We could start small, just a few students, but over time it could help dozens of women, hundreds even." Cecilia grabbed Elena's hands. "That's brilliant. Yes, absolutely yes." They spent the evening planning, sketching ideas, making lists, imagining possibilities. For the first time since the fire, Cecilia looked alive again, energized, hopeful. "We'll call it the Heir Workshop," Cecilia said, "after your maiden name. A place for women to forge their own futures." Perfect. The baby arrived 3 weeks later on a rainy April morning. The labor was long and brutal, 14 hours of pain that made Elena scream and curse and swear she'd never do this again. Cecilia stayed with her through all of it, along with a midwife from the village who was brisk and competent and didn't care about scandal. "One more push," the midwife said. "Come on, girl. You've fought dukes in courts. You can handle this." Elena pushed, felt something tear, something give way, and then a cry. Sharp and indignant and absolutely perfect. "It's a girl," the midwife announced, placing the baby on Elena's chest. "Healthy. Angry. Got a good set of lungs on her." Elena looked down at her daughter, tiny and red and screaming, the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen. "Hello," she whispered. "I'm your mother. I'm going to mess this up sometimes, but I promise I'll never make you feel invisible." The baby's eyes opened, gray, like Elena's. She stopped crying just for a moment and looked at her mother with what might have been recognition. Elena named her Catherine, after her grandmother, Catherine Harrow. not Darnell. Her daughter wouldn't carry the weight of a title she didn't choose. Victor visited a week later, nervous and formal. He stood in the doorway of the nursery like he was afraid to come closer. "May I?" he asked. Elena nodded, watched as he approached the cradle, looked down at his daughter for the first time. His face did something complicated. Softened, broke, reformed into something Elena had never seen before. Wonder, maybe, or the beginning of love. "She's perfect," he said quietly. "Yes. Is she healthy? Does she need anything?" "She's fine. We're both fine." Victor reached out, touched one tiny hand with his finger. Catherine's fingers closed around it reflexively, and he made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. "Thank you," he said, "for letting me see her, for letting me be here. She's your daughter too. You have a right to know her." Elena paused. "But rights have to be earned, Victor. You can visit, you can be part of her life, but the moment you try to control her, or me, or turn this into something about ownership, that's when it ends." "Understood. I'll earn it, however long it takes." He visited weekly after that, awkward at first, unsure how to hold a baby or change a diaper or soothe her when she cried. But he learned. Showed up even when it was inconvenient, even when Catherine was fussy and screaming. Read to her from books she was too young to understand. Told her stories about his own childhood, things he'd never shared with anyone. "My father never held me," he said one afternoon, cradling Catherine while she slept. "Said it would make me soft. I'm not going to do that to her. Whatever else I get wrong, I won't make her feel unwanted." Elena watched from the doorway. This wasn't the man she'd married. That man had been cold, closed off, incapable of vulnerability. This version was raw and uncertain and trying so hard to be better. She didn't love him, wasn't sure she ever could again. But she could respect this. The effort, the genuine change. "You're doing well," she said. With her. "You're doing well." Victor looked up and something in his eyes made her chest tight. "Thank you. That means more than you know." The Heir workshop opened 6 months after Catherine was born. They built it on the site of Cecilia's old workshop, but larger, with proper ventilation and good lighting and separate rooms for different kinds of work. Women came from surrounding villages, some fleeing bad marriages, some widowed, some just desperate for a way to support themselves that didn't involve depending on men. Cecilia taught them book restoration. Elena, when she had time between caring for Catherine, taught them bookkeeping and basic business skills. They hired other instructors for sewing, cooking, skills that were marketable. The first graduate was a woman named Sarah, who'd left her husband after he broke her arm. She learned bookbinding and started her own small business in the next town. Sent back a letter thanking them for giving her a life. "I thought I'd have to go back to him. Thought I had no choice. You showed me I did. You saved me." More letters came. More women. Word spread. The scandalous duchess who defied her husband was now helping other women do the same. The newspapers covered it, some approvingly, some with shock, but all with attention. Elena didn't care what they wrote. She cared about the women who walked through the workshop doors scared and left confident. Who learned they were capable of more than they'd been told. Who built lives on their own terms. 2 years after the trial, Thornwick held a town meeting. Elena attended, expecting hostility. Instead, the new council head, Mr. Garrett, who'd been elected after the old council resigned in disgrace, asked her to speak. "The workshop has brought resources to this village," he said. "Jobs, revenue, respect. We'd like to formally apologize for how you were treated, and ask if you'd consider expanding here, making Thornwick a permanent home for your work." Elena looked out at the assembled villagers, saw some of the faces that had once thrown stones, burned her home, tried to drive her away. They looked uncomfortable now, ashamed. "I'll consider it," she said, "on one condition, that we establish a fund for women in crisis, housing, food, legal help, so no one else has to fight as hard as I did just to survive." The council agreed unanimously. Mrs. Pemberton wasn't at the meeting. Elena heard she'd moved to another town, unable to face the judgment she'd once so freely dispensed. Elena felt no satisfaction in it, just a tired sort of sadness that it had taken public shame to make people recognize their cruelty. On Catherine's 3rd birthday, Elena stood in the garden behind the Dowager cottage watching her daughter chase butterflies. The little girl was fearless, laughing as she ran through the grass, her dark hair flying. Victor arrived with a gift, a wooden rocking horse he'd carved himself. "Took me 3 months," he admitted. "I'm not very good at this yet." "It's perfect. She'll love it." They sat on the garden bench while Catherine played. The silence between them was comfortable now. Not the cold distance of their marriage, but the quiet of two people who'd hurt each other and were learning to exist in the same space without wounds reopening. "I've been thinking," Victor said, "about Ironvale. It's too big for one person, too empty. And I was wondering, what would you think about turning part of it into an extension of the workshop? More space, more resources, a way to reach more women?" Elena looked at him, surprised. "You'd do that?" "I'd like to, if you'll let me. Not to control it. You and Cecilia would run it completely, but to contribute. To use that house for something that actually matters instead of just sitting there gathering ghosts." That's generous. It's practical, and maybe a little bit selfish. I'd like Catherine to grow up knowing her father did something worthwhile, that he learned from his mistakes and tried to make the world better because of them. Elena considered. Ironvale as a place of refuge instead of a prison. The rooms that had felt so cold filled with women learning, growing, building futures. There was poetry in it. "All right, but on paper it's a loan. The workshop leases the space. I won't be indebted to you." "Fair enough." Catherine ran over, demanding her father push her on the swing Cecilia had built. Victor stood, letting his daughter drag him across the garden. Elena watched them together. Catherine fearless and demanding, Victor patient and engaged. A relationship built on presence, not obligation. She'd never expected this. Never imagined that the man who'd broken her heart could become someone she trusted with their daughter. But people changed. Sometimes. If they chose to. If they worked hard enough. That evening, after Victor left and Catherine was asleep, Elena sat in her study. A small room she'd claimed for herself, filled with books and papers and plans for the workshop's expansion. Cecilia found her there, staring at an old letter. "What's that?" "The letter I left for Victor, when I ran away. I kept a copy." Elena read it again, her own words from 3 years ago. "I won't raise them in the shadow of your regrets. I was so angry when I wrote this, so certain everything was ending. It was ending, but endings make space for new beginnings. I know, I just didn't expect the beginning to look like this. Didn't expect to be happy." Cecilia sat beside her. "Are you? Happy?" Elena thought about it, about the workshop full of women finding their strength, about Catherine asleep upstairs, safe and loved, about Victor learning to be a father instead of a duke, about this cottage that felt more like home than Ironvale ever had. "Yes," she said, "I am. Not because everything's perfect. It's not. Catherine had nightmares last week. The workshop is always short on funding. Victor and I still have difficult conversations. But it's real. It's mine. I built this life with my own hands, and no one can take it away from me. That's all anyone can ask for. A life that's genuinely theirs." 5 years after Elena left Ironvale, the Heir workshop graduated its 100th student. The ceremony was held in the Great Hall of Ironvale Estate, now officially the Heir Institute, a place where women could learn trades, find refuge, and build independence. Elena stood at the front, watching women receive their certificates. Some were young, just starting out. Others were older, starting over after years of hardship. All of them had that same look in their eyes, the look of people who'd survived something and come out stronger. Catherine sat in the front row beside Victor, 7 years old now, and already reading at a level 3 years above her age. She wanted to be a book restorer like Aunt Cecilia, or a lawyer like Miss Vaughn, or possibly a horse trainer. She changed her mind weakly. "You did this," Cecilia whispered beside Elena. "All of this. Because you were brave enough to choose yourself. We did this. You, me, everyone who helped. No. It started with you. With one woman saying, 'No, I deserve better.' Everything else grew from that." After the ceremony, Elena walked through Ironvale's halls. They looked different now, warmer, more lived in. Students' artwork hung on the walls. Laughter echoed from classrooms. The cold museum had become a home for dozens of women finding their way. She ended up in the conservatory, the place where she'd sat freezing and miserable, pregnant and terrified, planning her escape. The plants were alive now, Someone had restored them. Roses bloomed, ivy climbed the walls. It was beautiful. Victor found her there. I had the gardeners work on it. Thought you might like to see it the way it could have been. It's lovely. So are you. Elena looked at him, surprised. I'm not trying to. Victor stumbled over his words. I just mean you're remarkable. What you've built. Who you've become. I'm in awe of you. I'm the same person I always was. You just never bothered to look. I know, and I'll regret that for the rest of my life. He paused. But I'm grateful I get to see you now, even if it's from a distance. Even if we can never be what we were supposed to be. We're better than what we were supposed to be. We're honest. That's more valuable than whatever romantic fantasy our parents imagined. Victor smiled. It reached his eyes now, something that rarely happened in their marriage. Catherine asked me yesterday if we're friends, you and I. What did you tell her? I said I hoped so, that I'm trying to be the kind of person worthy of your friendship. He looked at Elena. Was I wrong? Elena considered. Once, she would have said yes. Would have said they could never be friends, not after everything he'd done. But time and change had shifted things. They weren't friends, not exactly, but they were something, co-parents, allies, people who'd hurt each other and chosen to grow instead of staying bitter. You're getting there, she said. Ask me again in a year. He laughed. I'll hold you to that. That night, Elena stood in the doorway of Catherine's bedroom, watching her daughter sleep. The little girl clutched a book to her chest, a collection of adventure stories about brave women doing impossible things. Tomorrow, Catherine would wake up and ask 1,000 questions, would demand to help in the workshop, would argue about bedtime and vegetables and why she couldn't have a pony yet, and Elena would answer every question. Would let her help where it was safe, would negotiate bedtime and hide vegetables and soup, and explain that ponies needed space they didn't have yet. She would be present, engaged. She would make mistakes, already had made mistakes, would make more. But Catherine would never doubt she was wanted, valued, seen. Elena had survived a marriage that tried to erase her, had fought a legal system designed to punish women for choosing themselves, had rebuilt from ashes, literally, and created something that mattered. She'd been called unstable, immoral, unfit, the scandal of the county, a duchess who'd forgotten her place. But she'd never forgotten her place. She'd just realized her place was wherever she decided to stand, and she'd stood, fought, built, survived. Not for a title or a marriage or anyone's approval, for herself, for her daughter, for every woman who'd ever been told to endure instead of escape. Elena pulled Catherine's door almost closed, leaving it cracked so light could find its way in if her daughter woke scared. Then she walked downstairs to her study, where Cecilia was already working on plans for next year's expansion. Ready? Cecilia asked. Elena sat down, pulled out her papers, and smiled. Always. Outside, stars appeared in the darkening sky. The Harrow Institute settled into nighttime quiet, and in the Dowager Cottage and the great house and the workshop and the gardens, women slept peacefully, knowing they were safe, knowing they had a choice, knowing that somewhere a duchess had walked away from everything and proved that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is choose yourself and build a life worth living on your own terms.